really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Hey, thanks for joining me here again for another episode. Today I'm answering another one of the most frequently Googled questions about life, which is, what do dreams mean? If you've been listening in all this year during 2022, you know I've been tackling this whole list of questions that Google put out that were the most frequently typed into Google search by people just looking for answers to things about life that matter to them. And I've decided to take it on and see how many of these questions I already have some sort of an answer for, and how many questions I might need to learn about in order to discuss or answer here. So this question, what do dreams mean, is very intriguing for me because I'm a person who has a lot of really significant dreams. And so not all the time, I sometimes go for a long stretch of time without remembering any of my dreams. But throughout my life, I've had a lot of dreams that have been really powerful. I would say teaching dreams that gave me information that I needed that actually made a huge difference for me. And at the end of this, I will tell you about one of those dreams. You may have heard me talk about it before, but one of those dreams that has informed my spiritual path in huge ways. And I'll talk about that at the end. So that means you have to stay tuned so you can hear this incredible dream that I had. So first of all, what are dreams? We know that dreams happen during our REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep at night. We cycle in between REM and non-REM sleep throughout the night. And dreams occur when we are in the REM cycles, and there are, say, 4 to 6 of those cycles per night. Now, it requires us to have fairly regular sleep for enough hours for these cycles to take place. So it's important that we get a decent amount of sleep during the night in order to have really productive dreams, which for me, that's probably one reason why I don't dream as much, because I don't sleep very well these days. But anyway, that's a different subject. There are significant benefits to dreaming. In fact, we know that dreams are essential for our health. And dreams have been shown to prevent depression and anxiety, to increase concentration and coordination. They help improve memory and help us store new memories. And dreams also help us express repressed thoughts and emotions. So things that are coming up from the subconscious that we may be reluctant to look at during the daytime may come up in our dreams. And Matthew Walker is a scientist who has done some studying on dreaming and also sleep. And he says that dreams are like overnight therapy, that during our dreams, we are actually coping with the trauma and the emotions of the day. And we're coping with them during a safer, calmer situation. So our brains are reviewing things that happened during the day, reprocessing them, and we're able to cope with them and handle them a little bit better with less traumatic emotions than we can during the day and during times when we are actually in a traumatic situation. So he's actually done research showing that this is true, that dreaming actually helps reduce our emotional reactivity to certain situations. And he did it by showing people upsetting images and measuring an MRI while they were looking at those images, measuring stress hormones in the brain with functional MRI while they were seeing those images, then waiting 12 hours and re-measuring the effect on the brain from viewing the images again. And what he found is that if people didn't sleep or dream during the 12 hours in between seeing the upsetting images, they actually had the same effect. The functional MRI showed the same amount of stress hormones being produced from the images. But if people were able to sleep during the 12 hours in between seeing the images, they had much less of the stress hormone effect shown in the functional MRI of the brain, meaning that dreaming helped them process the emotions over the images so that they were less reactive the second time they saw them. So it kind of makes sense that dreaming can help us with our depression and our anxiety during stressful times. But the problem is, many of us have a much harder time sleeping when we are stressed. So that's where sleep would be the one thing and that would really help us, sleep plus dreaming. But oftentimes when we're stressed, we lay awake in bed at night ruminating about the things we're stressed about instead of sleeping and allowing dreaming to help us process those things. So that's something interesting to remember. Maybe if we're awake in the middle of the night and we have these circular thoughts going through our head, we're trying to solve problems and figure something out, that actually staying awake and thinking about that problem is not the best way to come up with a solution. Sleeping and dreaming would actually be much more beneficial. So maybe that can help us shift out of that rumination mode and work toward falling asleep. And maybe that means we listen to music that helps us fall asleep. We do something to distract our minds from those circular loops of thinking. And then the second thing that Matthew Walker found is that dreaming enhances creativity and problem solving, which I already mentioned. And there are so many stories of people who came up with the solution to a problem or a new invention or created something new because of a dream they had. And one example, Paul McCartney wrote the song Yesterday because it came to him in a dream. And there are many, many stories and many, many creative people who will talk about these experiences, like seeing a painting in the dream or getting an idea from a dream that told them what they needed to do the next day on some problem that they were trying to solve. And that's amazing and a wonderful thing when it really happens for people. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what our dreams might mean when we're looking at the content of dreams and why we dream them. And another thing that researchers and people who study a lot of dreams have found that typically dreams reflect our current life concerns, something recent that has happened in life, perhaps one day or even 7 days ago, some experience we've had, something we're thinking about, and we reprocess those events and experiences. But they may show up as strange little fragments here and there. They may not make very much sense, and they may be mixed in with more distant memories, with people from the past or situations from the past. But oftentimes these are ways the brain is creatively searching for ways of solving these concerns that we have about life by just piecing together lots of different types of information and bringing that together. But so many times I think when we look back at a dream we've had, we may recognize, oh yeah, I think that's because I was really worried about having to go to the doctor's office tomorrow. And we might be able to pick up on that, but oftentimes it will be mixed in with such other strange settings and situations and people and objects and places that we cannot detect or decipher what exactly the meaning is. However, occasionally we have a dream that's very coherent, that gives us a very clear message. So again, dreams can reflect our own emotions, and this we mentioned before, they can bring up repressed thoughts and emotions, things we haven't wanted to look at or think about. But within our dreams, we may see what our emotional state is like, even our repressed emotional state. So when we look back, if it was a dream where we were frightened, someone was chasing us, and we were frightened and afraid, running away and trying to hide, the one thing to take away from that is the emotion of fear, or that something is bearing down upon us, something overwhelming is trying to overtake us. That can be really helpful if we use that emotion that we look at from the dream and take it back to apply to, what am I afraid of right now? What's going on? What do I feel is chasing me? And is there something I need to look at or process more during the daytime to help me with that? So also, one of the benefits we talked about, dreams help us consolidate memory. And so it's interesting because our brains are actually sifting through events that have happened and trying to pick out significant events that should be stored in the memory. So the content of our dreams can be really interesting because it tells us what the brain has found to be significant, that it is trying to remember by reviewing it and keeping it in the conscious mind through dreaming. So that may help us as well to know that whatever subjects we were dreaming about from the day, at least our mind, our subconscious, is telling us this is something important that we shouldn't forget about. That's why it's coming up in a dream. So I find that very interesting as well. And I would say I have had many dreams that have reminded me of something that I maybe hadn't thought about for a while, that brought something back to me that I actually needed to be in touch with. So the fourth thing is that some people believe that dreams may forecast the future. Now, there are definitely scientists who don't see things this way, who don't see that it's possible to ever forecast the future. But if you think about it, particularly in terms of health within the physical body, there's a part of our consciousness, our brain is the activity center for the entire body. So we have part of our consciousness that is aware of everything that's happening throughout the entire body. And there are many women who've been diagnosed with breast cancer who have said they actually had dreams warning them of breast cancer. It may not have been an obvious, direct, overt warning, but when they looked back later at dreams they had been having off and on for months before their diagnosis, there were signs and symbols within those dreams that were pointing them to go to a doctor, get some testing done, there's a problem. And so they could see evidence that they were receiving messages through their dreams that something was wrong. And so these were messages telling them to pay attention to something. Now, I myself had a pregnancy which ended in miscarriage, but at about 6 weeks into that pregnancy, I had a dream that this was an ectopic pregnancy and that I had to be rushed to the hospital and nearly died because it was an ectopic pregnancy. And I woke up thinking, oh my gosh, could this be an ectopic pregnancy? But it wasn't, and I had none of the symptoms of it. Yet 6 weeks later, I had a miscarriage. And so in my mind, the dream was in some way warning me or preparing me that something about this pregnancy was different. And when I had the miscarriage, I thought back to the dream and thought, aha, I was perhaps my consciousness was just letting me know something isn't quite right here. Something isn't the way it should be, and preparing me in a way that something would happen in the future. It's easy for me to interpret it that way. There are many scientists who really scoff at that and don't believe that that's even possible. But it makes sense to me, as I said, our brains being the central activity center for the entire body, recording all of this data and information that's coming in from the body, could have the ability to perceive that something is wrong. Now, also people have had prescient dreams about things that are happening remotely to people they care about and love. And I have heard so many stories about these dreams. I totally believe that that's possible as well, that people could be somehow interpreting messages or sensing energetically that something is wrong for someone they love and someone they're very connected to. But again, that's controversial. There are tons of scientists who would, push me out the door for saying that, but I am open to all of those stories. And there's so many stories out there of these things happening that you cannot deny it. So in my mind, I can't deny it. I think we have to listen and be aware of these stories and then think for ourselves about our own dreams. What have they taught us? What have they shown us in the past? What might they be showing us now that could be helpful to us? So our fears also come up in our dreams and our pain. Sometimes we have nightmares and night terrors, and those dreams could be instructive, but we may be traumatized by our own dreams at times as well. And that may mean that we need to seek help elsewhere from a counselor or a therapist who would help us talk through and process those dreams so that we don't get overwhelmed by the fear that is coming up in the dreams. And it might be that a traumatic experience from the past that has been repressed is trying to come to the surface, and it's arising through our dreams, but it isn't specific enough that we can figure it out or understand it. So sometimes getting help from another person who could listen to our stories and help us process the dreams might make a big difference and might help us find our way through so that we stop having those dreams. And I guess I could tell you in this regard, after my father died by suicide, I had a whole series of dreams that were very frightening for me. And the dreams all involved three different subjects. One was falling from a high place. Another was drowning in a body of water. And the third was being shot by a person, which is how my father died, by gunshot, self-inflicted gunshot wound. So those were my three types of recurring dreams that I had when I was grieving after my dad died. And eventually I began to process those and work on them because for a while I was afraid to go to sleep at night, afraid of having a dream. I also started kind of lucidly monitoring my own dreams at night. And if I thought the dream might lead to falling or drowning or being shot, I would wake myself up rather than have the dream. What I learned eventually is that these dreams were trying to help me process my own fears and my own trauma about my dad's death, and that I needed to have the dreams and complete them. And so what I learned over time was to allow myself to stay asleep, to go through the dream and allow the dream to happen. And in each case, as I started to do that, the dreams would suddenly turn around and move into a more positive direction when I allowed myself to just have the dream and I allowed all of those emotions to be present and come to the surface. That's just one example for me of how I was able to use dreaming to heal myself, though in the beginning I suppressed my dreaming and tried to prevent it because it scared me. But once I got beyond that, I found it to be extremely helpful for my grief ultimately. And then I wrote some stories about it. I did a lot of writing over time, which was very helpful as well. So another thing that I read from dream researchers is that they really feel the symbolic meaning in dreams is highly personal. And I know that there are books I've seen where they talk about certain symbols like a window and what it might mean if it's in your dream. But what some researchers have said is that it's far better if each one of us decides what windows mean in our own dreams instead of reading about what they've meant to other people. But we're better off interpreting the symbolism for ourselves because it's likely to be very personal and very subjective. and based upon our own psyche and what's happening within us. And so perhaps looking too much at other books that tell us how to interpret dreams might actually inhibit us from getting the real message of our own dreams, because we're using someone else's interpretation instead of delving into the symbols in our own dreams and the images that come up and the patterns that are there. So while I think this question may have been hoping, like, here are the 5 things that show up in your dreams, 5 different symbols and what they mean, I think each of us has to do the work to figure out our own dreams and understand what they mean, though certainly talking to someone who's a dream therapist could be very helpful to get their interpretation and their help actually figuring out what the dream might mean. I wanted to also mention there is a researcher, Joshua Black, who's looking into grief dreams and the types of dreams that people have of their loved ones after death. And his work is really fascinating and very interesting. And I did an interview with Joshua on the End of Life University podcast, and he also interviewed me for his podcast about some of the dreams that I had while I was grieving my dad's death. So that's another very interesting subject. And what he's found is that for the most part, grief dreams are healing and reassuring, and actually sometimes offer us an opportunity to feel connected to our loved one, because for the most part, those are the types of grief dreams he's looking at, dreams people have of their loved one when they see their loved one or connect with them somehow through the dream. So I'll refer you back to that interview on End of Life University if you want to hear anything more about it, or to his website where you can learn more about grief dreams. And so lastly, just to talk about how might we use our dreams better to get these positive benefits from them. And the first thing, of course, is to try to remember your dreams more often. And all of the researchers have said that writing your dreams down in a dream diary is the very best way to start remembering your dreams, because you're actually informing your mind that these dreams are important. And I would like to remember them. Like, I need to be able to write them down, so I have to remember them. And you can train yourself to remember dreams, but you have to record them as soon as you wake up, because as you've probably experienced, if you wait a moment or two, the dream starts to dissolve away and disappear, and you will lose a lot of the important elements in the dream if you don't write it down quickly. So they recommend keeping a little notebook or journal at your bedside with a pen, so that as soon as you wake up from a dream, you can jot down some notes about it. And you may want to write down the dream in detail, or you may just want to write down some of the images that you remember, some of the emotions that were present. Just a few things that can help you bring back what was significant and what stands out to you about the dream. You can then use your dream diary to start looking for patterns, because maybe you've been recording your dreams for a month and you have a dream about climbing up a mountain and you think, wait a minute, I think I dreamt something like this once before. You're able to go back and reread previous dreams and find the similarities between them and see what the patterns are that exist there. That's one of the ways that I identified this whole series of dreams I had about falling and drowning and being shot at. So the patterns can be really helpful in recognizing if you are being shown these types of events or symbols or images in your dreams over and over again. There's something important there to look at. And so as you're looking at the content of a dream, you can ask, like, how does this reflect on something that's happening in my life right now? Something that has happened very recently, just in the last few days. Are there any elements of what I experienced that are showing up in some way, even in the dream, even if it seems very tangential, even if it seems like a weird connection and a strange way of looking at the experience you had. Look for those connections to current events. Then also look for any past memories that may be coming up over and over again. I know I have had certain people from my past who come up again and again in my dreams, and I've recognized that this one person means a specific thing in my dream. I'm not actually really dreaming about that person or something that happened with the person. It's just that that person has become a symbol for something else in my dream. And so whenever I dream about that person, I know, aha, I'm on that track again. I'm thinking about this issue and I'm getting some more feedback and information about it. So that can be really helpful. Just getting familiar with what seems to pop up over and over again in your dreams at night. And then again, recognize that oftentimes dreams seem completely nonsensical, but they are filled with symbols of one thing that represents something else. And sometimes the way that they're connected seems to not make very much sense. And like I said, this one particular person who recurs in my dreams, I came to recognize has to do with my self-esteem. And so this person shows up in different situations and scenarios, but as I looked back on all the times I've dreamed about this person, I began to recognize that something within me was growing and changing in each one of those dreams, and that actually the way I connected with that person in the dream changed, and it was a sign of my growing self-esteem as I had been doing a lot of work on myself. So anyway, that's just an idea that sometimes the symbols don't necessarily make sense to us. We don't understand why was that connected? Why did that come together in that way? But so be open-minded, because anything might mean anything, but just be open-minded and sit with things. Write down the things that make no sense, that you don't understand, because future dreams might explain some of the things that you're dreaming about now. So write it down, let it be there, and see if it begins to make some sense to you down the road. So again, as I mentioned before, getting enough sleep at night is really essential. And so doing things to improve your sleep, like avoiding caffeine late at night, from what I read, not being on your phone or computer right before bed, not getting overstimulated with like really action-packed movies or something right before bed, having a nightly routine where you get yourself into a more relaxed state can be helpful. So any of those tips that help you sleep better will also help you dream better at night. So that being said, I'm going to end by telling you about my very special dream. I've talked about it a lot, but I don't know if I have mentioned it much on this podcast, and maybe you've never heard it before, even if I have mentioned it before. So I'll tell you about it. And I'm describing about half of my dream. This is like the second half. So this was one of these epic saga dreams. There was a whole story before this particular event that I'm describing, and I don't really have time to talk about the entire thing. So I'm going to just tell you, in this second half of the dream, I was taken into a room that was a round room. It was circular with kind of a dome-shaped ceiling, and I was escorted into that room by this adorable little old man with white hair and a white beard, and he was a really kind and gentle man, and he took me in and just pointed to the walls of this circular or more spherical room that I was in, and on the walls was this mural that encircled the entire room, and the mural was made up of separate little pieces or images. And when I got closer, I saw that those images were actually little videos that were playing. So there were thousands and thousands of these little videos that were all connected one to another to make this huge mural that covered the walls of the room that I was in. And as I looked more and more closely and walked around the room at all these little videos that were playing, I saw that the videos were all scenes from my life, things that had happened. Sometimes they were just the tiniest moment, like laughing at something funny that someone said. One time I was eating an ice cream cone, but one time I was getting my rejection letter for not getting into medical school, and I was devastated. Of course, in one of the videos, I was hearing the news that my dad had died by suicide. And so there were videos of absolutely everything. I mean, there were millions of these little videos, and it was like every moment of my life, all the good things, the mundane things, the tragic things that had happened to me. And I saw all of it displayed on the walls of this room. And the one thing that stood out to me is that every one of these events that were being depicted in this mural, each one had its own place in the overall picture that the mural was creating. Every single event was important in its own way, and all of the events were interconnected. So each one was essential to make this pattern that existed within the mural, and also to allow other events to happen. So every event was connected in some way or another. Each thing that happened led to something else that happened. And what it told me is that every single moment was necessary and important in its own way. Every single part that was there, all the good and the bad and the mundane and the ordinary, were a necessary part of the entire picture of my life. And I turned to the old man and I was so excited because it's like, oh my gosh, like I get it. I had seen something that I had never understood before, ever in my life. I saw it that moment in that room. And I said, I understand it now. It's all perfect. It's all perfect the way they all fit together. Everything. I don't have to be in despair about what happened in the past. I don't have to regret anything. I don't have to question why it happened. I can just accept that this was all part of this pattern, this mural, this tapestry of my life. Everything had a place. Everything fits. It's perfect. And I said to the old man, if only I had realized this a long time ago, I would never have worried as much as I did about my life. And the old man put one finger up and touched my lips to stop me from talking. And he said, no, even the worry was perfect. So I woke up from that dream, and I actually have goosebumps right now just talking about it. But I woke up in this completely like enlightened, heightened state of awareness and feeling energized and feeling like, oh my God, I think I get it now. I think that I understand how life works. And I understand it for myself, at least, in my own life. I understand how all these things happened, and all the things that made no sense to me, all the things I was angry about that seemed unfair, all the things that I had resentment for, all of the things that even I felt special about, like, oh, wow, I'm so lucky. This was so amazing that this happened to me. Everything, all of these things, everything just fell into its place. And I saw it so clearly, and it put me into a completely different space in terms of experiencing life from that point on. because I never forgot the dream. I never forgot what I saw. I never forgot how I felt within that dream. I never forgot that expanded sense of awareness that I came away from that dream with. And it is present with me every day. I think about it all the time. And in every moment, no matter what's happening, I'm aware that this is another video in my mural. This is another piece of this puzzle of my life that's coming together. And I may not know what it means. I have no idea why it matters or how it fits in. I just understand that in some way it does. I understand it's part of this picture. And even if I don't like it, it has its own contribution to make. So that awareness changed everything for me, everything in my life, and everything spiritually for me. The only reason I'm here even recording this podcast is because of the change that happened for me in my life. After that dream, also after working with hospice patients and finding that everything I was learning from my work there was consistent and aligned with what I had seen and became aware of in that dream. So all of it flowed together. Everything fit together perfectly for me in that moment. So that was my dream. I didn't mean to spend such a long time talking about it. It was powerful. It changed my life. It healed me in so many ways. And as I said, those frightening dreams I had had earlier in my life, those mellowed out and dissolved and went away. But I understood the place in my life for that to take place and for them to happen. So anyway, that's why I'm really excited about the idea of dreaming. I hope that you will take a positive look at your own dreams and keep a dream journal and let your dreams speak to you and teach you, because there's just so much that you can learn about your own inner world, your subconscious. You can learn about your wounds, your pain. You can also learn about your joy, your purpose, what matters to you, what's meaningful to you. All of those can become apparent to you through your dreams. So I hope you will enjoy your dreams from here on out, and let me know. Write to me at kwyattmd@comcast.net and let me know what you learned from your dreams. Meanwhile, if you enjoy this content, please tell other people about the What Really Matters podcast. Share an episode or two, or show them how to subscribe to the podcast. Also, if you subscribe or follow the podcast and leave ratings and reviews wherever you happen to listen, that's very helpful as well. And there are ways that you can help support this podcast if you go to eoluniversity.com/support. You can offer some financial support in 3 different ways. You can buy me a coffee every now and then for $5. You can make a contribution of any amount that you choose, a one-time contribution through PayPal. You can also join my page at patreon.com, where you'll be contributing to this podcast and End of Life University, and you'll receive bonuses for signing up there and making monthly or annual contributions. So that's at patreon.com/EOLU. And meanwhile, thank you to all of you who are listening. I appreciate you being here. And until we're together next week, remember, as I always say, we're here for love. So face your fear. Be ready for whatever life brings you next. And boy, it's a mystery. We have no idea. And just love each and every moment of your very special life. Bye-bye.